First, Stephen, let me thank you so much for being here and for being a part of this exhibition. We really would love to feature and champion our animation program and the game program that you're now a part of. And you're a BCC graduate, so uh, could you talk about what you studied and what you learned here at BCC? What got you started, and what were your aims and goals for yourself when you came here as a student?
Yeah, so when I was in high school, that was during the time when the game industry was going through, I guess, a bit of a renaissance. It was making that transition from 2D to 3D gaming. And there were a lot of games during that time that were really making a lot of buzz and really making a lot of waves within the industry as the game industry started to grow past that point of just being like this little niche thing and started to becoming like this general, everybody kind of sort of does it now. And during that time, I was pretty certain that I wanted to be involved in that industry. I wanted to pursue creating games. And so from out of high school, I went and tried to look to see if there were any colleges at the time that actually had a curriculum in game design. And unfortunately, there were none. So during my heyday, I had to sort of like just go with the flow kind of thing, and I thought, well, um, you can't make a video game without graphics, right? So maybe I should go into like 2D or 3D animation or something like that. And so then I went and pursued my dream of being a game designer by pursuing an education at Bergen Community College with an associate's in applied science for computer animation. That's where I met Francis.
Uh-huh.
And so I just did as much as I could to learn like the timelines and frames and modeling stuff, polygons and vertices and edges, and all sorts of craziness. And yeah, it was a huge fun experience. Um, and I tried to sort of tailor that towards gaming as much as I could. So
So
yeah.
what was the moment when, as a gamer, and I have to admit, full disclosure, I think except for one lost summer where I spent way too much time when I should have been working, killing skeletons and monsters on Diablo. I think that may be my only experience with gaming whatsoever. So I'm really coming at this as a complete novice. So, but I'm wondering. What was the moment when you were younger and you decided I could create a game like this? I could do this. How would I go about that? What I need to learn? Was there a particular game you were playing that led you to that aha moment? I could do this.
I guess you could say, yeah. So one of the things about video games is that we've certainly evolved and gotten past the just the high score kind of thing, right? And so video games have now become a great platform for storytelling. And a lot of games have really great stories in which me as the player am an active participant in that story. I get to participate and influence that story. My decisions can change the outcomes of how things unfold within the story. And that way, in that sense, it's not just a piece of media that I just sit there and takes me by the hand and it guides me to where it wants me to be, or
Uh-huh.
what shows me what it wants me to see. you know um I get to be the master of that story. And so that's why, for me anyway, the game that did it for me was a game called Final Fantasy. And I always wanted to create a game that tells a story. And so Final Fantasy was my introduction to a game telling that story of just this grand adventure and it stuck with me, and I've always wanted to make a game like that ever since. And so I guess in a way, Final Fantasy has a huge influence in my desire to create a story-driven narrative game with role play elements and stuff like that. So I guess, yeah, that would definitely be the starting point of all that.
Oh, that's so cool. So why don't we take a look at some of the things that you've worked on in the past, and maybe you can then show us what you're working on now. Um, you have you've got this project called Juno. Is that something you'd like to tell us about?
Oh yeah, sure,
Or
absolutely.
let me.
So Juno was a passion project. It's a city that is from the game Final Fantasy XI Online. It's an MMORPG, a massive multiplayer online role-playing game in which you control a character of your creation, and you get to explore a virtual world with thousands of other players, and you join together in parties or groups to overcome challenges and deadly monsters. And one of the areas in that game is a fantasy city that is literally in the middle of an ocean called Juno, and it was it was a place that I spent a lot of time in because it was sort of kind of like considered like the hub for the players in that game. It's where you went to go to the auction house to buy armor and gear and spells and stuff like that to enhance your character. And a lot of people went here to like advertise, oh, we're going to be going into this dungeon, or we're going to be killing this monster. Anybody want to join us and stuff like that? So it's a very lively city in the game, and it was very central to the Final Fantasy XI experience for a very long time. But the game is old. It came out in 2001 in Japan and then 2002 in the United States. And so the graphics haven't aged well. It looks really, really old and crude. So I decided, with basically all the training and the skills that I've learned over the years, to pay homage to the Final Fantasy XI Juno City that I remember so fondly spending so much time in my youth, that I decided to recreate it using the Unreal Engine 4 game engine with current generation graphics. And this is the result to that.
So this is your character. He's moving his way through your set and your immersive sort of design. So this is all of these graphics are ones that you've constructed and built with the software you were describing.
Correct. So like the character in itself, the blue cyan
Uh-huh.
character that looks like a dummy, that's actually just provided from by the game engine as
Uh-huh.
like a test character, so that you can, if you create a third person game like
Uh-huh.
this, you'll be able to just quickly just test the environment.
Mm-hmm.
But everything else, in just regards of the sheer environment, down to the plants that you see, to the textures on the floor and the walls, to the 3D models that populate the scene, even the lights, I created all of it from scratch.
It's amazing. Well, I was really struck by the lighting, especially the veracity of the shadows, and everything is just really spot on. The reflections, it's unbelievably detailed and nuanced in the way you've constructed this, and it's really compelling, actually. This is not like
Yeah,
It's not like Diablo.
yeah, it took me a good 4.5 months to make all of this, and that was because I had to keep my Final Fantasy XI subscription active so that I could visit the city to get the reference material that I needed and make sure everything was to scale
Hmm.
and that everything was as close to the original as possible in terms of architecture, uh, spacing, placement, and just the whole entire like 9 yards. Now, the original Juno, if you ever do like a Google search of this city,
Mm-hmm.
that city doesn't look anything remotely to what you're seeing right now. It looks like it's like comparing like PlayStation to an Atari. You know, it's like the graphics back then just were not that great, but when we were playing them, we thought they were great.
Sure, of course, of course.
um, so yeah, this is a huge facelift. It looks amazing as it does because of the tools and the and all the enhancements and upgrades that have happened in game engines over the decades. And yeah, so it looks as great as it does
It's
because
awesome.
chip technology has evolved.
So what software do you use? What programs did you use to create this?
Well, I used quite a handful. I used
Mm-hmm.
Unreal Engine, which is the game engine that this is running on. I used Modo 3D modeling, which is the 3D modeling software that we use at Bergen Community College to do the 3D models and the UV editing. I used Bitmap to Material
Mm-hmm.
as well as Substance Designer to create some of the textures.
Mm.
I used World Machine to create the mountains in the background so that they look like mountains.
Oh, wow.
It's a program that generates height maps. Uh, and I used speed trees to create the plants.
Wow. So actually, I have to say, I had no idea there were all these specific softwares just devoted to the creation of these particular 3D elements. Um, that's extraordinary.
Yeah,
Well, it's
it was
beautiful. Do you feel
it was a
like
lot
you
of work.
do you feel like you've captured the vibe of Juno itself, even though you say the graphics are completely different, obviously, and massively upgraded? Does it have the same feel that it had for you as a player?
Well, uh, to answer that question, uh, that was something I even asked myself. Like, does this capture the magic that was Juno?
Mm.
And the answer to that question is, unfortunately, I no longer play Final Fantasy 11, but I do now still play Final Fantasy 14.
Hmm.
And a lot of the players there used to play Final Fantasy 11, and I happen to be friends with some of those players.
So you've
And when
showed this to them?
I showed this to
Uh-huh.
them, and they were just absolutely floored. They were like, "Wow, holy crap, that's amazing. Are you gonna build the rest of the game?" I'm like, "No."
Well, typically those games are created by whole teams of people, I'm assuming, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right.
The whole
Yes.
collaboration with
Yeah,
multiple folks.
it's very common for a game like this to take years to create.
Wow.
Often 3, 4, 5, sometimes even 6 years.
Hmm.
And going beyond that, there are games that have been in development for 10 years. A little term in the game industry called development hell, because something either happens where the people developing the game aren't coming to agreement, or there's something going on with the higher ups, or
Hmm.
something with the project got defunded, or a bunch of nonsense happens, and it can really slow down the game and ultimately affect the quality of the game. And some people usually get really upset because certain things get cut or whatever.
Sure, sure,
um, but yeah, it does take an extreme amount of effort from a lot of talented individuals because it
sure,
takes a lot to make a game, right?
sure, of
You have
course.
programmers who program the functions to the game. You have level designers like myself who create the
Hmm.
environments. You have sound artists who create sound effects and music for the game. You have 3D modelers and animators, special effects artists, the whole nine yards. There's just so many individual talents that making a game seemingly on your own is almost an impossibility
Yeah, yeah.
unless you can do pretty much all of those things
Hmm.
in a broad sense, like be able to just have certain skills
Sure.
in that whole entire range of skill sets and be able to do it.
Well, this is awesome. Would you like to show us what you're working on now?
Yeah, sure.
Uh, would you like to show us what you're working on now?
Yeah, sure. Actually, I went from Bergen Community College to Vancouver Film School,
Oh, wow.
which is located in British Columbia, Canada. So I had to go a quarter of the world that way to the
Uh-huh.
west.
What led you
uh,
out there? What was it in particular about Vancouver that attracted you?
so Vancouver in particular, the reason why I went to VFS was during that time, after I graduated Bergen Community College in 2004, there were
Hmm.
still no schools that had game design
Hmm.
as a course. There they were starting to crop up, and there and I swear to you, because I did extensive research, I could fit the number of colleges and universities around
Hmm.
the world that had a game design curriculum. There
Uh-huh.
were seven, just seven.
Wow.
This is a game that I'm working on with a team of four other people, and the people on my team are a programmer, a architecture, a 3D modeler and animator, and a UI artist who creates user interface graphics. So I'm on the team as a level designer. So I create the levels and the environments that you're seeing in front of you. These things here are placeholders. I created the particle effects. These mushrooms were 3D modeled by a 3D modeler. And this is one area of our cave that I'm going to be working on later. This dirt mound here is going to be carved into like a tunnel that leads into another section of the cave. Here's what I'm going to be doing today. But this is actually just a fragment of what we're really working on. And this is actually the entire project area here. So our entire game takes place on this island. And if I sort of zoom in over here, this is kind of like what the game looks like. And the first area that I developed was this forest area here, where we have these trees here, and we have like a village populated by these deer folk.
I was going to
So
say, are those llamas? But then I saw that they have
they are
hands.
they have hands. Yeah, our game is fantasy based, and we also have our main character in here. So if I hit the play button, I can walk around as our character.
It's a turnip.
Yeah, it's like a little mushroom guy, and he can sort of roll, wee, to sort of get around. And so here's our little deer guy. If I press E, they say hello. And so our world is pretty massive. It's going to be an open world action platformer game
Mm-hmm.
where you can use various skills to explore the world. And the point of the game is to recover the main character's memories, to retouch with their lost ancient civilization, to return back home with them.
So it's sort of like a mushroom slash turnip based version of Jason Bourne.
Kind of, sort of. I guess if we had to put it that way. But yeah,
Feel free to
it's
use that if if you need to pitch this. I'm all I'll help however I can.
yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be a massive world. Exploring is going to be a huge part of it because we want to have a nice, pretty world to explore, and so this is where our current focus is inside the game. So yeah, so I'm going to be carving this out,
Uh-huh.
uh, and hopefully we'll have some more updates on the mushroom houses. So we actually have a Discord channel with some of the concept art for this game, and I can share that on my screen as well. So you can see the process on how these ideas are coming up.
Yeah, I
Uh,
was going to ask you, where's some of your source material coming from? What's your inspiration for this?
right. So we have an actual game design document, and the game design document sort of holds all the information of the stuff that we come up with. So we'll usually talk on Discord on a voice chat like this,
Hmm.
and we'll start discussing ideas and you know, agreeing on those ideas. And then whatever we agree on makes it into the game design document. Um, so sometimes we'll take like pictures of food. You'll see like ridiculous things like this, but
Uh-huh.
this is the stuff that sort of inspires the design of the mushrooms.
Oh, sure,
You
sure.
know, um, we have concept art for how the housing of the mushroom areas are going to look like. Um, the character, what we want them to feel. We have map designs for how the cave will be.
Hmm.
Um, we have all sorts of interesting concepts that we explore, and we even look at other games for inspiration as well. So if we scroll up here a little further, here we have like a screenshot from Skyrim,
Hmm.
because we were fooling around with the idea of having a user interface that's similar to it. So in this screenshot, we'll see like UI elements, like that's what the mouse pointer would look like, and the
Right.
compass, and other things that would appear on the
Hmm.
screen.
Hmm.
We have flow charts that dictate how the screens are moving, depending on what buttons you press. We have uh, earlier concepts of the video game. We have, let's see here, some early concept arts over here of things that we're wanting to do for our maps. Here's like the tree, and there's the deer that you saw with the hands. It's
Hmm.
over here. And here's the concept art of that deer, which it's not finished. There's
Hmm.
supposed to be like plants and like leaves and stuff like that that grow out of the deer and stuff like that. It's supposed to be like a forest creature. But
Uh-huh.
so just keep in mind what you're seeing is
Oh,
very
sure,
early
sure,
development. We're
sure.
still building stuff. The mushroom area is going to have like these mushroom people that you can talk with and interact with, and they float around and stuff like that in the mushroom cave.
Well, it's unbelievably imaginative. And what strikes me is that, well, you were educated in a film school in Vancouver. It's the only reference points I have for understanding all that goes into making these games would be starting with cinematography and learning the craft and art of filmmaking, but the game dimension takes it so many steps further because you're not just creating a film or a background with, and you're not just telling stories, you're trying to create all of the different parameters with which one of the players or multiple players can then sort of recompose, redefine, just tell their own stories within that. And it's the degrees of freedom to be able to make that happen just boggle my mind, to be honest. And but it seems to be a very beautifully collaborative process that you're involved in. I'm sure there's lots and lots of areas for conflict in something like this. I'm sure there's lots of
Oh yeah.
screaming and fighting and shouting and Cheetos flying around but so but I'm sorry if I'm lapsing into stereotypes about gaming people, but uh, but it does seem like a really intricately collaborative process that it would require multiple points of view to be able to create something like this, to be able to anticipate all the degrees of freedom, all the different points of entry and exit, and how everything would move around. Just
Yeah, it's
it's mind-boggling. So how are you? You're now teaching this at Bergen Community College, which is, I think, just unbelievably cool. And what are the things that you find yourself reinforcing with your students that want to follow in your footsteps? What are the things that you feel like you most got out of your education as an artist or maybe as a storyteller? Um, I can imagine it'd be easy to get seduced by the programming parts of it, or to sort of fall in love with the different softwares. But are there things that are more fundamental that you're pointing out to your students and encouraging them to embrace in their early parts of their education?
Yeah, so it's like you said, being a player, it's all about the experience. It's all about creating a world that you seamlessly and unknowingly become immersed to, and you become an active participant of that world. That world becomes your character. And that's why when you see people playing the games that they're playing, they just seem so focused, like everything around them just
Mm,
sort of fades away. And if your game can do that, if your game can pull somebody out of the reality of the real world and for a moment just put them in this grand, beautiful world that's yet to be explored and yet to be experienced, then you've succeeded in creating a great and wonderful game experience that provides a story. Um, and so, one thing that I totally try to instill into my students is the knowledge that it's one thing to desire to make a game, and it's one thing to play a game, right? But it's an entirely different animal to actually build the game. And a lot of people come with the misconception that, oh, he gave us 3 weeks to make this project. I'll just do nothing for 2 weeks and like build the project in like 3 days or something. And yeah, they sometimes they fail to realize just how much work it is to build even something, like this, where
mhm,
it's just like you will be at this for days, if not weeks,
mhm,
and that time is absolutely required for you to come out with something that looks good and it's polished and provides that experience that you're trying to shoot for. And so I think a lot of people in my class, there are some who just come to this realization, like, I thought I wanted to make games because I was in love with the idea of creating the game.
mhm.
But then now that I'm actually doing it,
What do you mean?
I don't.
I got to work at
you
this?
you
I
gotta
thought
work
this
at
was
this.
supposed to be fun, man.
Yeah, and sometimes I get people who drop the class or, like, actually this isn't what I thought it would be, or ultimately I found it annoying, or something like that. But like that's what it is. I mean, the game can't make itself. You gotta put in the time. And yeah, so some people get turned off by that. But in taking my class and going through my rigorous rigmaroles, uh, they arm themselves with the knowledge to be able to feel confident in their ability to build something, right? As in the beginning of the semester, they don't know what's going on. Like an engine, what even is that? Like, 3D models, I don't know how to 3D models, whatever. But at the end of the course, they always feel like, oh wow, you know what? I have the tools, I have the knowledge to build this, and now I know what I have to do. Now I know how to approach the problem, of creating this mega thing that I have in my mind. And I feel that if I can do that as a teacher, if I can take somebody who had absolutely zero hope in making a game and turn that around and make them feel confident, like I can do this, then I know I have done my job as a professor here at Bergen Community College.
That's great. If in your best imagination, if Bergen was able to expand the gaming program, um, what would be the core elements, the things that you would see that you would want your students within the whole scope of their education, what would be the things that you would want them to focus on that maybe were game related and maybe not game related, but like within the arts or within literature or in writing, or what would be the things that you would say, if you really want to be a great game designer, these are the things that you should study?
Right. So in order to be a great game designer, one must play many games. So kind of like a chef, right? Like a chef, in order to become a good chef, you have to
Mm-hmm.
make a lot of good food,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to sort of go outside the box sometimes. And in that same sense, if you want to be a good game designer, you obviously have to have a lot of game experience under your belt, because you got to know what's out there,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Sure.
Because if you start making a game and it's just like every other game that's out there, in the whole ocean of games, then you're setting yourself up for failure, because somebody's out there who already has the game that you're thinking of and they
Right.
do it better,
Right.
right? So the more games you play, the more you understand where the industry is at as a whole,
Uh-huh.
and where you can go in order to create an experience that will be unique and different enough to stand out on its own merits.
Mm-hmm.
And to accomplish that, it's as you say, you need a multitude of different experiences
Mm-hmm.
from other forms of practices,
Mm-hmm.
uh, whether it be programming, even like in the arts. Art is very important, because video games are art.
Mm-hmm.
You need art in order to create the graphics onto the screen and provide those visual experiences that mesmerize and entice people into playing the game.
Mm-hmm.
And so you need art skills, you need programming skills, you need, you know, everything like that. And so if I were to try to make the game program here at Bergen Community College even better, I would seek to try to create some sort of collaborative uh, program that brings in the sound students, that
Mm-hmm.
brings in the art students, that brings in the information technology people with the programming and
Mm-hmm.
stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And because it literally takes all that to make a game.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, like that's how I would improve that. Like I
Uh-huh.
would create a curriculum
Uh-huh.
that, makes you take like a life drawing or an art class. I
Right.
would create a curriculum that would make you take like the very basics of sound or music design,
Uh-huh.
just so that you can put your toes in there. Because like I said, just focusing on a single point, yeah,
Right.
you're great at that one thing,
Uh-huh.
but if you can sort of broaden your horizons and be
Uh-huh.
maybe not the best at everything, but at
Mhm.
least you understand it and
Right.
know how, you'll get much more further developing a game than just that one little point.
Right. One thing that strikes me also is we touched on this before, but how collaborative the process is. And I think a lot of my students, when I teach them online or even when we're in face-to-face classes and I give them group projects to do, oh my God, the moaning, the crying, the wailing, the resistance, like, oh God, not a group project. No, no, I can't do. I hate them. I hate them. Yeah, so it's like unbelievable resistance to that. And I try to point out is this is the way the work world is structured now. But this kind of project, and that's really a beautiful scene there, by the way. That's
Oh, thank you.
so cool with the leaves blowing and the modeling of the shadows on the ground. Um, it's really quite beautiful. The collaborative process in game construction seems to be, one of the key aspects to it, because there's just way too much for any one person to possibly do, and to learn how to work in a group of strong-willed creative people, that's a skill all unto itself. So it's, there's no way that you could create something as beautiful as this sort of just out of one's own head, unless, like, as you said, unless you've got, 20 years to do it. But,
Yeah, yeah, that's
but,
it. That's exactly right. You absolutely need all kinds of people of different skills and creeds to help
mhm,
you make the vision.
mhm,
Uh, and you have to be willing to compromise on that vision sometimes in order to get everybody on board. Because, if you take too much ownership in the game,
mhm.
then nobody feels like they have a stake in it,
Right,
and they feel less
of course.
inclined to participate in the
Participate.
creation.
Absolutely, to contribute. You're absolutely right. Well, we're really lucky to have you at Bergen, and we're proud of everybody who graduates from this college, and it's always, I think, particularly rewarding to see students come back after having completed advanced degrees in other institutions that come back and teach here. And um, it's so great that you're a part of this faculty, and um, it's been wonderful talking to you. Thank you so much for sharing this, and thank you for being a part of this show.
Thank you.